this presentation is going to go for about half an hour until the pizza comes at 6. It's going to be about replies. So, this is going to be hopefully aimed at people who've done a little bit of debating before, or at least vaguely familiar with the 3-on-3 process. Hopefully have been to a Monday night before. If you haven't, come up to me at the end and I'll explain anything that didn't make sense. But in essence, replies are something new that we're going to add to debating from now on, because they're what we do at Australs. Australs is the Australasian Championships. Shara just mentioned it before. And instead of just simple 3-on-3, they've got an extra speech, basically. So in this session, I'm going to be explaining what a reply is, how to write a reply and deliver one and hopefully do it well, how to judge a reply if you're an adjudicator, and it's important to note that the Adj test for Australs will have replies in it, so you'll have to judge them, so pay attention to that if you're planning on trialling and this is new to you. And then I'll give you a few examples of very good replies that you guys should try and learn from if you are delivering them. I assume we'll be doing replies in the practice debates after this, so let's get going. So, what is a reply? It's a 4-minute speech given at the end of the debate. So that's half the normal 8-minute speech. It's given by one of the speakers in the team, except for it can't be the third speaker. So it's still 3-on-3. There's still 3 people on each team. There's just one person who gets to speak twice. They're going to be speaking for 12 minutes over the whole debate. The first 6 speeches happen like normal. First, second, third, and then the negative team stands up and gives a reply. This happens in reverse order. So it goes third neg reply, AF reply, and then the debate finishes. The aim of a reply is not to introduce any new material or any new rebuttal. So it's even more strict than a third speech. Normally in a third speech, you're not meant to bring up totally new ideas. You can't do anything that's totally new for the debate. In a reply that goes a step further, you can't even respond in a new way. You're just meant to be summarizing what has happened. The idea of it is that you summarize in a way that makes you win. That's why some people refer to it as a biased adjudication. You're standing up there and explaining what's happened in the last 6 debates. Hopefully they didn't take 6 weeks. And in a way that puts your team on top. So if you're on the negative side, you're delivering adjudication where the winner is the negative team. Does anyone have any questions at this stage about what it is, in a broad sense? Cool. Now we'll go on to talking about how you should try and deliver a reply. Often one of the biggest things that people notice about replies is that it's delivered with different manner. By that I mean the way you present it, the pace, the tone, how aggressive and shouty you are, things like that, volume. Often people use a more subdued and reflective tone in a reply. So instead of yelling at someone and explaining why they're dumb, you calmly and politely tell them why they're dumb. But this doesn't have to be the case. You can do a reply any way you want. It's just the norm or the practice that people do it in a calmer tone. It's up to you whether you want to buy into that. I'd encourage giving it a go at the start. It's probably more useful for everyone to debate a little bit more calmly. They are referred to as biased adjudications, but you still use the first person. So you're not pretending to be the adjudicator. You can still refer to your team. Say, on the negative side, we proved to you whatever you proved, and then continue in that frame of mind. So nothing too crazy is changing here. Often people are just a little bit more calm. You don't have to be. The thing to think about if you're writing a reply is that 4 minutes is surprisingly short, especially when you're used to rambling on for 8 minutes off of not very many notes and filling in the gaps as you go along. You don't really have time to do that in a reply. So normally people keep it to 2 questions or issues. They summarize the debate in 2 broad themes. So, for instance, in a debate about, does anyone have a particularly good debate topic at the top of their head? No. All right. In a debate about banning school uniforms, the first question might be, is it fair to ban school uniforms? Is that a principally logical thing for the government to do? And then the second question might be, what's the practical effect of banning school uniforms, and does that lead to good outcomes? That might be how you choose to divide up a particularly boring debate. The thing to remember here is that you need to be efficient in moving through them. That means people generally do shorter introductions. They don't waste as much time signposting. They'll just say, I've got 2 issues, then jump straight into them. And generally, people have to be quite efficient with your language. You're trying to cover 6 speeches worth of the material in only 4 minutes. You've got to be concise. All right. This is probably the most important bit in terms of content. Obviously, the content you're talking about draws from the debate and what happened. So if you had, 4 or 5 different arguments as an affirmative team, the affirmative reply should hopefully touch on all of those and touch on the rebuttal brought from the negative team and from their arguments. But recognize that you can't cover everything. And so you should focus on the important debate-winning stuff. This is where it's important to get a little bit meta and reflect on the debate as a whole and put yourself in the adjudicator's shoes. That's probably the number 1 tip for delivering a good reply. Think about what the adjudicator considers when they're coming up with a decision in a debate and how you could convince the average person that your side is correct, and then focus on that in the reply. Focus on just proving that you've won. That will normally mean talking about the contentious issues. If something's gone back and forth through all 6 speeches in a debate, it's probably merits a bit of time in your reply. The other tactically smart things you can do is point out when the opposition hasn't responded. Often people will do that in 2nd or 3rd speeches, but in a reply, they don't get another chance to respond. So it's kind of hammering the last nail in the coffin if you can say, this was a really important point. If you can explain why it wins you the debate, and then say, and they didn't even respond to it, that's obviously a good sign. What I've set up there by don't avoid they said, we said, is that often people fall in a trap of a reply of just stepping through the issues of the debate and just be like, at first speaker, we said this argument. They responded at first speaker with this argument. Then we responded with this argument, and then that, and then that, and then that, and that. It's often quite boring. It doesn't teach people much about the debate because the adjudicator is going to be writing all that stuff down anyway. It's preferable to cut to the chase, deliver the most polished version of the argument as it was delivered after developing maybe at third speaker, and then explain why your side was correct on either side that it fell down at. So don't follow the debate. If you don't feel obliged to follow the debate as it happened chronologically, mix and match and put the important issues at the front. Final dot point up there is about meta-analysis. Like I said earlier, that's just about what's going to win you the debate. Things to think about here are potentially the burdens on either of the team. If the affirmative side, like in most debates, is proposing a model that changes the world, changes the status quo, they have a burden to prove that it's better than the alternative. And if the negative side is doing nothing, then they have a burden to prove that potentially there's not much of a problem that the affirmative side is complaining about, or that the status quo is sufficient to fix the problem. If you think about these questions, it's a good way to frame the debate because you can stand up there and say, the other team had this burden and they did not meet it, they can't win, or we had this burden, we met it in these 3 ways, that's why we win. That kind of meta-debating, beyond the individual arguments, is a good thing and a good way to frame your replies. Alright, next slide is about the tactics. This kind of builds on that stuff when you're thinking about the content of a reply, but it's what you if you think in a debate, one of the key issues is one that you've conclusively and comprehensively won, you've just wiped the floor with the other team and you're really confident that you're much better than them. How do you think you should bring that up in the reply? Is it something you should not bother talking about because you've already won it, or spend a lot of time on it and prove that it's the most important thing? Or somewhere in the middle. It's probably spend a bit of time on it and prove that that's an important thing in the debate. If you've conclusively won something and you think that's enough to win you the debate, make sure you tell the adjudicator that. And don't be rude about it, but just point out the importance of a point. On the other side, if you think you're losing an important issue, you've got a couple of choices. You can use the reply to reframe what you've said and try and dismantle the opposition's arguments. Remember though, you can't say anything totally new. So if you come up with a zinger bit of rebuttal right at the end of the debate, not really allowed to slip it in there. Some people will do that discreetly and dishonestly. I'm not going to offer any comment on that. But in general, you can't put new stuff into your reply. So you're better off trying to minimize, again, in a meta sense, the importance of what they talked about. If they have proven that an outcome exists in the debate, or that principally something follows through to the conclusion that they want, maybe you should minimize the principle and say this is an outcome-based debate and the practicality is the more important thing. Or you can do the inverse. Try and minimize their victories. Third dot point is pretty obvious. When your opponent makes a blunder, point it out. Be appropriately polite about it, but also prove that their blunder is catastrophic and has lost them the debate. And then the fourth and fifth dot point on this slide in terms of tactics is just like a little bit of jargon. Right at the start, I explained that the negative gives their reply first. The significance of this is that, and you'll notice this when you do replies tonight, 12 minutes of uninterrupted negative time is a lot. If you're on the affirmative team, it's really quite boring and frustrating. If you're on the negative team, it's enjoyable because you get to hear your friends speak for ages. This is a really big advantage in debating, that they get this uninterrupted period where not only do they spend 8 minutes dismantling the opposition case, but then there's 4 more minutes of summarizing everything that happened in a way that can be quite persuasive. So you should take advantage of it. The third negative speaker doesn't need to do a long summary or conclusion at the end of their speech because they know the negative reply speaker is about to stand up and do that. So don't waste your time doing it. Rebut right to the end. On the flip side, the affirmative team has to recognize that after their third AF speech, they're not going to get a say for a long time. So the third affirmative speaker should potentially consider reserving the last 30 seconds of their speech to summarize what they've proven so that there's some clear ideas fresh in the adjudicator's mind. There's some clear takeaways before you get into 12 minutes of boring neg time. That also means that the affirmative reply should try to be a little bit flexible. More than a third of the neg team has spoken, in essence, after the third AF speech. And so the affirmative reply is the last chance to reframe the debate. Again, obviously you can't say anything totally new, but you can respond to what they thought was important in the neg block. So be flexible there. Does anyone have any questions on that? All right, this is all relatively theoretical at this stage. So I'm going to show a video of a reply and potentially pause it in key moments and demonstrate some of the excellent things that the speaker in question is doing. Nope. That's happening later. I'm going to explain how you adjudicate a reply. Replies are still scored, just like all the other speeches in the debate, but as you'll see on the slide up there, they get half as much. Where a normal speech averages a 75, and that's on a range from 70 to 80, a reply averages 37.5 on a range of 35 to 40. Those of you who are good at maths or can read the screen recognize that's half of the same range. Most people, or lots of people, when they're marking replies, will just do it normally, like you normally do marking a speech. You think, 75 is average, 76 is a little bit above, 77 is substantially above, 78 is very good, that kind of like gut instinct or reasoned analysis, and then just half it. Make sure you get your maths right. A lot of people don't. When you're thinking about this, it's just all the normal parts of adjudicating. Was the reply persuasive? Did it fulfill the goal of summarizing in a debate in a way that made you thought they won? It's as simple as that. Don't be overly conservative or like cautious. Lots of people have a tendency when they're adjudicating these for the first time to think that replies, they're kind of short, they come at the end, they can't be that decisive. They really can. If it's a close debate and one reply was substantially better than the other, that might be enough for one team to win it. Or even if one reply was so shocking and the other reply was really quite profound, that might bring the whole debate around. So recognize that they can make a difference, but also they are worth half as much. So if like for a reply to really like swing a debate, it would probably have to be twice as good as a normal speech. Does that make sense? They've got half the weighting, but don't be afraid to use it a bit. That's why it's easy just to mark it like a normal speech and then half it. Any questions there? Cool. All right. Now I believe we're on to looking at samples. So this is a debate from Australs. It was between, I believe, Sydney 1 and Monash 1, or at least a Sydney team and a Monash team. They're both very high quality. Topic, as you can read, employers should not have access to job applicants' criminal records. We're going to watch the negative team's reply, which is from Sydney Uni, and it was delivered by Elle Jones. Pretty sure that year at Australs she won the best reply speaker, so this is someone with excellent skills. One sec, I'll just see if I can load it. So the topic is about employers having access to job applicants' criminal records. They're arguing in favour of access.
Mr. Speaker, the very first and quite quick question in this debate was whether or not a criminal record was an arbitrary and extrajudicial punishment imposed upon ex-criminals.
So, thing to note there, not much fluffing around, no broad introduction. There's only 4 minutes, get right into it. Also a little bit of signposting. They told you that this point was brief. They told you, Elle told you this point isn't the most important thing in this debate just by saying it's quite brief. That's the kind of meta-analysis that you should be thinking about if you're going to write a reply or if you're judging a reply.
The negative told you two things. Firstly, that it's not arbitrary because recidivism rates point to a higher risk of these people reoffending, and that is a rational consideration. But secondly, we told you that it wasn't extrajudicial. I explained in my speech that there are a number of factors such as age, suppression, and the worth of a criminal record that meant that this was a judicially considered and a punishment that was at the discretion of the judiciary. Therefore, it was the imposition of a criminal record imposed by the judiciary. The next question then, given that this wasn't arbitrary or extrajudicial, became whether it was a worthwhile thing to have, which brought us to the question of whether or not criminality in the past was a relevant consideration to be considered by employers. And this was important to the debate, Mr. Speaker, because although the affirmative team tried to tell you that employers don't have the right to impose extrajudicial punishment, they didn't contest the right of an employer to consider factors that affected that employment. So let's look at why it did affect that employment. Firstly, we told you at a general level that
Thing to notice there, it's more kind of like weighing up why this was important, trying to point out like the principled contradiction of what the affirmative team was doing, that they would let employers consider one thing but wouldn't let them consider another thing. Again, good meta-analysis.
past behaviour was a good indicator of future behaviour, and that they were more likely to recommit an offence than other members of society. The affirmative team's response to this was to say they are not automatically going to reoffend. We told you that was true, but what we told you further was that it was okay for an employer to just value the risk of that reoffending, because the harms that would accrue to the employer were great if that risk did come to fruition. So what were those harms? We told you that the harms of reoffending of offences to the person would be detrimental to co-workers and consumers for two reasons. Firstly, that we should prioritise those stakeholders because they are already in a legal relationship with that employer. And secondly, because they have the right to feel safe at two levels. Firstly, that the employer is not going to hire someone who would be a risk to them. And secondly, that the employer will be able to be proactive in protecting them against people. Maddie's indignant outrage at an employer taking a sexual harassment complaint against a rapist more seriously than against someone else showed the gross disregard for the protection of co-workers and consumers that plagued the affirmative team's case. So let's look at, secondly, property crime. We told you that an employer has an interest in protecting their assets and the perception of the integrity of their company. The responses of the affirmative to both property crime and crimes against the person was to say two things. Firstly, again to reiterate that this wasn't an automatic thing that would happen. Again, we told you that it was still worthwhile an employer valuing that risk. But secondly, they told you, as their case whittled down, that where it was relevant to employment, they wouldn't allow that person to be employed in that workplace. That concession was important for two reasons. Firstly, because it
It's an example of pointing out where the opposition made a blunder. like it's L's contention here that this concession was an important deal in the debate. So pointed out at this when you're kind of summarising and thinking of it as an adjudication.
Acknowledge the general principle that we established in our case that past behaviour is an important consideration in viewing future behaviour. But it was important, secondly, because it conceded that even though jobs were valuable, they shouldn't be open to everyone in today's debate. So that brought us to the final question of today's debate, which was whether rehabilitation was really the responsibility of employers. Because perhaps it was the case that criminality was a consideration for employers, so that they should overlook it in the interest of rehabilitation. The conception of rehabilitation on the negative was that it was the realm of the state, that the state should upskill criminals and give them the best opportunity to get a job, but not enforce employers to hire them. We told you there was no right to a job. I pointed to the examples of bankruptcy, Swain pointed to the example of academic plagiarism. We got no response on that. But we also told you that it wasn't a right because they had committed fault in today's debate, which was why it was different to disability. Jobs are obviously ideal for people in society, Mr. Speaker, but we told you there wasn't a right for that, and that employers didn't have a burden to hire people that weren't the best place for their workplace. That's why the negative team won this debate.
So I think the really impressive thing about that reply is that just watching it in that 4 minutes, and I think if you pay pretty close attention, she summarised a whole lot of a debate and included a lot of content in there. And I feel like I've got a pretty good idea of what happened in the first 6 speeches, even without watching them. And I think the other important thing was that the thing I paused it a couple of times to point out about how you could understand how the different issues interacted with each other. The final issue of rehabilitation was potentially important, according to L, if it was more important than criminality, if it was more important than a employer protecting their own goods and their customers. And she kind of like explained how that fitted in to the other points. I think it was really concise and kind of impressive in that sense. Right, if people are keen, we'll watch one more reply. Because I think the pizza is still not here. Yeah, all right, one more reply. This one, coincidentally, is also in a Monash against Sydney debate. This is from 2012. It's Monash giving the reply now. It's also a negative reply. It's Gemma Buckley, our past president and general champion. The topic is that we should support a one-state solution. I thought about this, and I think I wouldn't have known much about a one-state solution when I was in first year, or at least even maybe last year. So these are some useful facts, because again, we're not going to watch the whole debate. A one-state solution refers to a possible political solution to the conflict between Israel and Palestine. This is probably going to be the understatement of the century, but in the Middle East there is a conflict over territory, like Gaza, Israel, and the West Bank. At the moment, Palestine is comprised of the West Bank and Gaza. That is disputed. The one-state solution is an idea that Gaza, Israel, and the West Bank should all be subsumed into one country. I don't know what you'd call it, but that would be one country with both a sizable Jewish population and a sizable Arab population. The two-state solution is kind of the status quo at the moment, kind of, and that's to have a separate Israeli Jewish state and a separate Palestinian state. In this debate, Monash is arguing for the two-state solution. They want Gaza to not be a part of Palestine, they want it to be part of Egypt, and they want the West Bank to be Palestine. The right of return, this is the final fact that might be interesting to you, is a right for Palestinians, or the descendants of Palestinians who were displaced when Israel came, post-World War II, to return to their previous homes, mostly in and around Jerusalem or areas there. This is not a right that the Israeli government recognizes, but it is a right that Palestine supports. All right, now I think that's a useful primer before we watch the debate. I hope that didn't offend anyone or was overly crude and simplistic. Monash won this debate, by the way. Then went on to the grand final against another Monash team. Monash won Australs. Don't be afraid of being sassy in replies. That was kind of good.
First, with regards to a right of return. And let's be clear about this. The lack of agreement historically for Israel to grant a right of return hurts their case significantly more than it hurts our case, because their entire model is premised on creating a state with a right of return for every Arab to live and vote and participate in that state. But beyond that, we actually analysed why a right of return wasn't necessary and why we couldn't get a solution with either. Because we told you, Palestine doesn't want a right of return just because it wants a right of return. It wants a right of return to guarantee two things. Firstly, access to Jerusalem. Secondly, access to economic stability. We told you the international community could guarantee economic stability, and in fact would be much more likely to do so when they had a sovereign state to deal with than under the status quo. But we secondly told you with regards to Jerusalem that Palestine would happily accept a Jerusalem that was administered by the United Nations, because they'd have an actual guarantee of access to that territory, which was much more reliable than the guarantee that Israel provided. So the question then was, would Israel accept the UN administered territory of Jerusalem? We told you that Israel ultimately wants peace. We acknowledge they would like control of Jerusalem, but we think they are more likely to accept a UN administered territory than to give up a part of Jerusalem in order to create this state. We also think, incidentally, they would be more likely to accept this UN administered territory than allow every single Arab who lived in that region to vote in their democratic elections and overthrow their state. And this was given to you all at Ed when you told us that the Jewish homeland is so important to those individuals and their identity and the sanctity of that homeland is critical. We told you that they were always more likely to accept our solution. Then with regards to borders, the Affirmative team had a real crack in this debate at proving that Gaza and how we get into Egypt would be a really significant stumbling block. Told you a couple things on this. Firstly, Gaza was a tiny speck of useless land that in actual fact wasn't going to be that integral to the success of the Palestinian state. And that any individual in Gaza who really identified with the Palestinian state is capable of moving to the West Bank and actually engaging in that state that we established. With regards to the borders and with regards to the territory, we told you we'd be more likely to get Palestinian agreement and they actually give a territory of their own than give it part of a one state with no guarantees that Jews would ever be forced to move out of that settlement. Finally, with regards to water, we told you the actual facts in this debate are that Israel exports water to Palestine, even without mentioning the international community could guarantee that water to Israel. So in reality, our solution was more likely than Israel giving up on homeland that Ed proved was so critical to it. But which was better? And the first thing we need to do here is remember that both of these individual states, both Jews and Palestinians, want a state of their own. And we think that's evidence enough to prove that they think it's going to be better for them. But with regards to Israel, we told you the moderation internally that Ed pointed to was in actual fact never guaranteed by their law. In fact, we just told you about being less likely to do it because they felt that enough. With regards to moderation, with regards to the Palestinians, we told you when those two were forced together to engage in the political system, you are less likely to get moderation and more likely to have those individuals radicalised and both fighting to gain control of the state we're now forced into live together. At the end of this debate, we proved that two-state solution was better for both parties and more likely. We were very happy with the process.
Alright. So I hope those two replies gave you a little bit of insight of what good replies look like. The takeaways, I guess, reply is an exciting addition to the 3-on-3 format. If for nothing else, then it gives the first speakers something else to do during the debate, and so the first staff doesn't get bored after they've sat down. I encourage you, if you're interested in giving them, if you're going to Australs and you're in a new team and you don't know who's going to give them, to have a look at more of them on the internet. There are a lot of debating videos out there, and there are lots of tips and tricks about how to deliver them well. I personally quite enjoy delivering them. I hope lots of you will learn to enjoy delivering them too. And I think it's one of the better opportunities in debates to be a little bit sassy and politely rude, because you're coming at the end of it and you're summarising everything and you're pointing out the opposition's blunders. All right, so if no one has any questions, we'll wrap up there. Cool. Thanks, everyone.